Hello again, everyone. I'm continuing my tutorials on Speak Correct English. This is the third one, but I've just done a quick promotional video and I used as an example the rather depressing answer one gets to the simple question, how are you? I'm good, which I find just totally wrong, although it's become universally accepted, and it's very strange. Anyway, that's my example on the promotional video, if you want to have a quick look for a bit of fun. But that's where we're going to continue my tutorials, because that is the next issue to be discussed. Good or well, which it's the simple answer to the commonest question of all, how are you? There used to be no doubt as how this welcoming question should be answered, unless you were obviously quite ill. In which case, I suppose you can say, I'm not very well, but then explaining what's wrong with you is particularly tedious to anyone but a very close friend or relation who really wants to know in detail. So you should always really say, I'm very well, thank you, even if you're not particularly well. But don't say, I'm good. It's just not the correct answer. I don't know why it's become so universally accepted, because to me it's very strange. I mean, if you're good, it really means you're not bad, or you're good at something. It doesn't refer to your health at all. But never mind, it seems to become the normal answer, but I would recommend you cut it out and just say, I'm very well, thank you. Or if you want to use good, you can say, I'm in very good health. Thank you very much. All right, let's go on to the another little bone of contention of mine, which is I or me, subject or object. More and more often I hear people starting a sentence, me and my mother, or me and my friend, or me and my dog, perhaps. But this is incorrect and very often impolite. It must be avoided. It could be said that some of the mistakes mentioned above are merely insignificant quibbles, which often seem to have become perfectly acceptable in modern society. But starting a sentence with the object form is not just a quibble, it's a genuine howler. And it shouldn't happen. Me and my mother took him for a walk is wrong on two counts. Me and my mother are the subjects, and him for a walk is the object, or more correctly, the objectival phrase. The subject pronoun here is, of course, I, so this should replace me in the example sentence. It is also polite and usually right to put oneself after others in most instances, and certainly in this case. Therefore, the correct version is, my mother and I took him for a walk. The sentence can be reversed, of course, in which case the wording becomes, he took my mother and me for a walk. The same logic applies to other pronouns. We is the plural and the subject. We took my mother for a walk, or my mother took us for a walk, perhaps us being the plural object pronoun. Right, let's hope you've understood that. We don't start off any sentence with the objectival form. Right, and now the next gripe I have is about a simple little word of two letters, of. When is it necessary and when is it redundant? Now, there are circumstances where the use of is necessary and actually it is quite important. but very often it just isn't required. And a case in point, disturbingly common in recent times, is the unnecessary use of after outside or inside. He was hiding outside the back door is concise and correct. He was hiding outside of the back door is wrong. Of just isn't required in this instance, and yet it is so often added in this context, and I don't understand why. But there we are. Conversely, there are occasions where of is essential and yet is often omitted. One such case is, in which immediately comes to mind, is in conjunction with the verb throw. He threw it out the window is horrible to my mind. Here you do need of. You throw something out of somewhere. All right. He threw it out of the window is right. What about he got out the car? Well, that's a reasonable thing to say, he got out the car. If you want it to mean he got it out of the garage, perhaps, or he brought it out from the drive for someone to get into. It does not mean he got out of the car, i.e. he wasn't inside the car and he got out of the car, because it needs an object. Got out of needs an object, not got out of. I'm sure you understand what I mean. Anyway, got is a bad word and should be avoided whenever possible. But it's in this instance, it's quite difficult to avoid. I mean, describing the entering or leaving of a car, I think you have to use get or got if you want to get in the past. He disembarked or alighted from the car sounds stupid, frankly, whereas it would be acceptable if describing the leaving of a ship or an aeroplane. Now, of comes up again in a few other contexts, but we'll move on to that a little later. Another popular expression which comes to mind, which I don't like as well, is he's down the pub. He's gone down the pub. Again, here you're missing out the little word to. You don't go down the pub, you go down to the pub. I mean, it's got a bit of a humour about it. He's gone down the pub. But it's really just a lazy use of English. He's either at the pub or he's gone to the pub, as I've said. I mean, why not just say he's gone to the pub? Unless, I suppose, the pub is actually at a lower altitude, in which case he would go down to the pub, but down to the pub, not down the pub. I mean, it's like saying down the plug hole, of course, that would be acceptable, so you're going straight down something. But it's just all a matter of using English correctly and making the effort not to be lazy and abuse it and omit essential little words. Oh dear. Now, I'm again probably being too literal, and it depends how seriously we want to maintain acceptable spoken English. I want to try and keep it at a high level, as high as reasonably possible. I know one has to become more informal nowadays with a lot of chit-chat and all the social media stuff that one sees and quick communication. People tend to cut out essential words and foreshorten everything, especially when they're doing text messaging. But when we're speaking, let's try and use decent, complete language. All right, let's go on. What about comparisons? Now, these can cause problems, and there's one particularly essential fact which is often not grasped, and this is when adjectives use the comparative form. I mean, most adjectives can be expressed in 3 ways to determine degrees of comparison. Take big. John's car is big, or John's car is bigger than David's. That's the comparative using or er. Or John has the biggest car in the group, the supreme situation where you're using the suffix est or est. So what's the essential fact, which I've mentioned already, which is sometimes not appreciated? That is to be found in the 3rd example. John has the biggest car in the group. This signifies that there must be at least 3 cars in contention. If there are only 2, then the comparative form must be used. John's car is the bigger, not the biggest. If there are only 2, it's only the bigger. And that's just correct English. It's fairly simple. The use of the supreme form of an adjective is necessary, only when at least 3 objects are being compared. Let's take beautiful, where you can't really use the or the est suffixes, because that would be clumsy. Beautifuler or beautifulest, just on proper words. So you say Anne was beautiful, or Mary was more beautiful than Anne, or Jane was the most beautiful girl on parade, or of the 3, if you only have Anne and Mary there still. Now, these are simple examples of comparison, this time using more and most. But please take note, 2 girls are being discussed here in the 2nd example, where Jane, or Mary, was more beautiful than Anne. Or you could say Anne is pretty, but Mary is the prettier. Just discussing those 2 girls, not Anne is pretty, but Mary is the prettiest. It's just incorrect. Just out of interest, you might want to note that a couple of very normal adjectives change their comparative form completely. For instance, good, better, best, and bad, worse, worst. There are others, but I think good and bad are the most common, most obvious ones. All right, I think we've done enough now for the 3rd tutorial. I don't want to go on too long. Fully appreciate that I can become boring as I drone on about these things. So I hope that what I have discussed here you will have noted, and that you'll see my 4th tutorial, which I'll publish next week. Thank you very much. I should mention that if you want to get the full sort of complement of errors which I'm trying to eliminate, I've written a short Kindle book, very short. I will expand it to a proper paperback, and finally to a proper audio version, which will be a complete long audio version, all in one go. But those will be for sale on Amazon Kindle for very, very reasonable prices. I think it's $2.45 the Kindle at the moment. So you might want to get that if you want to be able to refer to it without having to look at these YouTubes. Righto, that's enough now. Thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, stay alert.